A major American university tonight has a lot to answer for now that claims of a particularly shocking sexual assault have been made public.
An extraordinary move on one of America's most prestigious campuses, the University of Virginia, shutting down all fraternities as it investigates sexual assault claims.
We move now to the crisis on campus. This after a very disturbing sexual assault allegation at one of America's most prominent colleges.
Shocking allegations of sexual assault on campus. They were exposed in a Rolling Stone article and have led the university to suspend all fraternity and sorority activity.
Those are just some of the network TV headlines when Rolling Stone magazine published a bombshell piece on an alleged rape, gang rape, at the University of Virginia. But as we learned today that even Rolling Stone now has some serious doubts about its own reporting, seems like an apt time to look at how this story got to where it is. Howard Kurtz is host of Media Buzz right here on FNC. It airs on Sundays. Howie, good to see you tonight. And so how did we get to this point where Rolling Stone, with a single source, publishes this lengthy piece, and you've got the mainstream media jumping all over it?
Megan, I've done a lot of investigative reporting, and this story should never have been published. You cannot go with sensational charges like these based on a single source without corroborating evidence, without identifying anyone, and without making some contact with the men who are being accused of this heinous crime. Now, the University of Virginia's reaction, I think, in a way, gave these other national outlets some license to run with this. They did use words like alleged and claims. But we live in a world where there's very little re-reporting because everything goes viral in 10 seconds and it's on the web, and then TV jumps on it. The Washington Post, to its credit, did poke major holes in the story this week, but everybody else just kind of repeated it.
They did, and Eric Wemple at the Wemple blog has been doing it, and so have others at the Washington Post. But it got started by a blogger who said, "I smell a rat, I don't believe some of the details, and somebody needs to probe further."
And that's a perfect example of the world of new media in which we live. This guy, Richard Bradley, former editor of George magazine, the old JFK Jr. magazine, he'd already been burned by a serial fabricator named Stephen Glass. And on this little-known blog, he wrote that, you know, not based on any investigative reporting, but his own analysis, that it didn't smell right, that it didn't add up, that there were holes in the story. And that, I think, spurred other organizations, Slate, the Washington Post, people like me, to take a second look at just what Rolling Stone had reported.
That's right. And to Slate's credit, because, you know, that is a left, obviously, far left website. And, you know, this would be sort of the typical case where they would say, we want to believe the woman must be right. But they did some digging, and they interviewed the author of the piece and unearthed some of the problems that the author was guilty of in writing the piece. What do you think of what I said with Rich, which is, you know, as somebody who was reporting early on about the problems in the Duke rape case, that fake rape case, there was no rape, I was a very young reporter at the time, and I remember being very jarred by people calling me a racist, people saying I must like rape, you know, I'm not on the right side, and they try to brush you off if you raise doubts about an accuser's story. Do you think that played a role here?
It was fascinating to watch your reporting in that Duke lacrosse case, which of course turned out to be so bogus. And even when I wrote about this a couple of days ago, I had to hesitate to say, I'm not saying nothing happened here, we don't know, but there are a lot of holes, there are a lot of discrepancies, there are some apparent mistakes. And yes, sexual assault is a very big problem on campus. And one of the tragedies of this Rolling Stone fiasco is that I think it undermines the claims of women who actually have been raped or sexually assaulted. But it is hard to take on, and there is this sort of backlash that you experience and that you risk about, well, why are you even raising questions about this? You know, investigative reporting, sometimes you fall in love with your source and you fall in love with your story and you want it to be true because it's a pretty big scoop if it's true. And that's where editors come in. They have to say, you haven't got it, go back and do more reporting.
At these universities, these claims of rape, it's not all about the young woman making the claim. It's also about the young men whose lives are going to be ruined if this is a false claim, ginned up for whatever reason. Last question before I let you go. Did she have any business promising this woman, this alleged victim, that she would not contact the alleged rapers in order to get this story?
Sabrina Erdley, the reporter, has given conflicting stories on that, but no, absolutely no business making that claim because then you're tying your hands as a reporter. Maybe something happened, but it was consensual. You have to try. You have to try your hardest to get the other side, particularly because you're dragging their reputations potentially through the mud. That was one of many failures here on the part of Rolling Stone.
We haven't heard the last of this by any stretch. Howie, good to see you. I'm sure you'll be talking about that on Sunday. Up next, the mess unfolding in Washington, New York, and Miami as the protesters disrupt some of the biggest cities on the East Coast. Back in a moment.
shoot! Don't shoot!